Week 4 of the 2023 NFL season and fantasy football and best ball season are just about in the books. And we saw multiple first-round picks explode in week 4. A couple offenses, some pretty nice games. A couple offenses, Cincinnati, not so nice. We're going to get into all that here today on Monday Night Best Ball on Spike Week. Let's do it. So, Rob, I'm sitting and watching the games yesterday, having played a particular individual in DFS. Spoiler, it didn't go well. And all I can sit there thinking about, which tells you about how warped my brain is the fact that all summer, all you did was complain about how you could never get your hands on the pick that allowed you to get this player, Jamar Chase, all summer. And I'm sitting there with as much money invested in this one stupid DFS slate where I played this guy against the Tennessee Titans, watching the Bengals score another whopping 3 points and just look like the worst team in the NFL, and just sitting thinking, you know, it's really tilting that Rob wanted to have all of the Jamar Chase and the fantasy gods blessed him with none of it, basically, as the Bengals lay another stinker. And they will be something we'll definitely talk about today. I am very worried. And I think a lot of people should be worried about the old Bengals and any Bengals bags that you might have. But that was the downside of week 4. There was a lot of other good stuff, lots of big performances that we'll also get to here today. But how was week 4 for you? Best ball, DFS, everything, watching the games, any of that fun stuff?
This was the best week so far for me all around. I had one really bad 2v2. I was so mad at myself when the tournament kicked off, and this is going to sound like hindsight, but when I tell you it, I finished like 15th or something, I think, in the double spy yesterday, the $200 double spy. So I made like 600 in that, hit on a couple other lineups, but in the double spy, I had Josh Kelly, Chargers defense. And I was back and forth on that with Kyron Williams, Ravens defense. And I was playing, and this is where like the rust is still there a little bit on DFS. Kyron Ravens was the play no matter what there, because I had a Jalen Hurts, AJ Brown, Terry McLaurin bring back. So Kyron was fine, and my brain was still going to ownership stuff.
Yep.
And it's like, okay, we made a lot of money. Shout out to Drafters, by the way, giving me a $55 ticket. Finished 3rd in that tournament.
Nice.
So that was nice. Thanks, Chris Olave. Catch more passes.
Unbelievable. We'll talk about them too. They're also on my fucking shit list for this first month.
But yeah, I mean, not having a ton of Jamar Chase and having over 20% AJ Brown felt really, 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 really good yesterday is what I'll say. So thanks for giving me all the late picks, fantasy football gods, best ball gods.
Yeah, seriously. I will, of course, get into all the games, all the impacts of everything that happened. It's looking like no true, like major injuries, seemingly for the first week ever. I know we had a bunch of guys get dinged up. T. Higgins is already supposedly trying to push to play this week. So hopefully, you know, fingers crossed that he's not hurt, but it seemed worse.
Cracked rib, right?
Yeah, a fractured rib, I believe.
The worst.
A good shouts to him for playing through that. If he does, I would be surprised, but they're in must-win mode really right now every week for a while. So maybe he will push to play. Kenny Pickett. I haven't seen any updates on MRI results, but I saw that they were optimistic that it was not, or they don't believe that he blew out his knee. So he'll probably miss some time, and it might be a lost season for the old Steelers here too, pretty quick.
I saw before we went on that he's going to push to play this week, but realistically they have the bye week the following week. So my guess is he sits out this week, gets the bye week, and then we'll see what happens with him at that point.
Yeah, we call that the Austin Eckler, where everybody's like, oh, he's going to push to play. He's going to try to play. And you're like, guys, they got a bye next week, and they're playing the Raiders. I think if they can't win this one, the season was probably without Eckler. The season probably wasn't going to go very well anyway. There was a couple of other injuries that I'm probably forgetting, but again, nothing super. That's nice. Nothing like
nothing crazy.
Nothing broke the fantasy landscape like we've had in so many of these weeks so far. So that is nice.
Sorry to the Seahawks and Giants tonight. Because that's the jinx.
Hopefully you don't have a lot of those guys, because we've definitely mushed something bad happening in tonight's game. Then I need lots of Seattle. I have tons and tons of Seahawks across all of my teams. It would be nice if, that first round superstar prospect rookie, got a couple targets. That would be fun. A usable week just once. I'm not asking for 30. Like a usable week would be very cool from a really talented wide receiver. But there's lots of really talented wide receivers not putting up usable weeks so far this season. And of course, we'll get to all that. But the kind of big thing that has definitely happened this week to me was a lot of the first round picks and the superstars kind of doing what they do. You can kind of run all the way down the list down to the Josh Jacobs and the Derrick Henrys having bounce back games. And obviously Justin Jefferson just doing what Justin Jefferson does. Christian McCaffrey showing. I had somebody, I apologize if it was even somebody watching, or I can't keep track of all the different comments and everything that I see or articles that I read. And somebody mentioned that they were concerned about Christian McCaffrey's ceiling as a 49er because he never really put up a monster. He scores like 25 every week or 30, but he never does, the totally nuclear week. And then poof, we see that. We see Christian McCaffrey in San Francisco is Christian McCaffrey in San Francisco, exactly like we all expected. The guy is a superstar and has nearly unmatched, him and just the Jeffersons and Tyreeks and such of the world with that kind of ceiling. AJ Brown, as you mentioned, with an absolutely monster game, capped off by the long touchdown. Was that the game winner, or that they kicked a field goal? I can't remember, but he had a long touchdown fairly late, a second one, to get to 9 for 170 something and 2. Stephon Diggs with an absolutely monster game with 3 touchdowns. I'm forgetting some
Mark Andrews got 2 touchdowns. And
thank God.
We got to talk about tight ends again today, because it is worse than we expected. We thought it might be bad. We were slightly optimistic, but we're going to have to hit on that. The CMC thing, we kind of hit on this over the summer. I'm not saying that we ever said to take CMC over Jefferson or Chase, because that didn't come out of either of our mouths. But one of the points we were bringing up with CMC was his usage as a 49er last year only tailed off when they were up big, and that's when Elijah Mitchell was getting all the work. And this year, it's just, I know Mitchell didn't play yesterday, but they're just relying on CMC heavy. This, like, you can see them going for it this year, right? Like they're throwing everything against the wall to win the Super Bowl this year.
Yep.
And that includes throwing CMC to the Wolves just to get as much usage out of him as they absolutely can to make sure that they're winning.
Lock up this division. They got to go lock up this division and then let Jordan Mason and Eli Mitchell do it later, because they, like you said, Shanny is not pulling any punches with old CMC. So
no, not at all. So they're just getting whatever they can out of him. But I still think that we had the right process, and I don't know if this is where you want to start. Just based on the way drafts were going, I still think CMC 3 to 5 was probably right. Mm-hmm. Even though I personally like CMC over Kupp and Tyreek, I was still mixing them all about, and like my ownership is like 8 to 10% on all 3 of those guys.
Yeah,
because I just didn't want to. I didn't want to take a hard stand there. And as we all know, I will take hard stands, but I really like CMC a lot. I kind of wish I took a little bit harder of a stand on him in that spot, but I understand the thought process as to why most didn't. And it was the way drafts were breaking, where we felt like we had to get that wide receiver early. And I still don't think it was completely wrong. Obviously results oriented. He had 4 touchdowns yesterday, by the way. He's not doing that every week.
Could have had 5. Purdy snuck it in with Purdy on the last one. I thought he was going to get 5.
Another reason why I didn't make as much money as I could have yesterday. I could have sustained a 2-touchdown CMC game. Hard to sustain the 4-touchdown CMC
right.
game. Right. So I think the process was probably still right as of now. I think this is one of those things we want to asterisk, though, and go back at the end of the year and see if it actually matters in the first round if you are taking a running back or wide receiver for structure, or if you can still build around more hero RB teams with a guy like CMC. But he's also such an outlier, such an outlier at the position that I'm not going to say we're never going to see his production levels again. But dude, it's going to be hard to ever get another CMC in the league. Like, he's souped up DeAndre Swift. Like, this is what we wanted Swift to be. Swift will never be it. I can't see any other guy totally being what he is. We were hoping Pollard was, and I think Pollard's running slightly bad just because of how good that defense is right now.
Yeah.
But even at like optimal run out, I don't think Pollard would ever be CMC. And I just don't know if we're going to see it again. So I wonder if when we see special players like that with Jefferson, with CMC, I think they are the two most special players in the league right now. You just, if they're on the board, you just snap tape going forward.
Yep. And I'll go back through kind of my rankings process for all of the what you just mentioned. And at the end of the day, what I will say is it's really easy right now to say, okay, Cooper Kupp hasn't played because he got hurt, and Jamar Chase, the Bengals are so bad that Jamar Chase can't do anything. So you're like, well, yeah, now I can say, I'm not saying you, but I'm saying it's natural human brain to be like, oh yeah, I should have just taken Jefferson or Tyreek or CMC, right? It feels easy now, but in May, June, July, whatever, Cooper Kupp was healthy, fresh off of just another insane. I know he only played 10 or 12 games or whatever, but he was the wide receiver 1 through that time, and Matthew Stafford's back, and we're seeing look at what Puka's doing. We're seeing what Puka is doing. You probably just would have slotted Kupp in for the wide receiver 2 behind Jefferson or Tyreek or whatever. Anyway, my whole thing that I feel really good about, no matter where exposure landed or where you ended up racking and stacking those top 5 guys, but it was that there is a top 5. And I don't think that was always the consensus either. Some people, and now I know Eckler has also been hurt, so I don't want to necessarily throw shade at people who really loved Austin Eckler, but I had him in a tier after that. I even had Kelsey in a tier after that, right? Diggs, AJ Brown, whatever. All those guys came there after that clear top 5, which was Jefferson, Chase, CMC, Tyreek, and Kupp. The order, so I never moved the top 2. Jefferson and Chase, they just stayed 1, 2. And there's multiple reasons for that, not just rankings, but also, like you said, once I identified that clear top 5, I didn't really want to be locked out of any of them because they were in a tier of their own. I don't really care to take a big stand against them. I'm not saying that's right or wrong, but that was the process. As the summer unfolded, I actually started with Kupp 3rd and Tyreek 4th and CMC 5th because of what you said. I was like, oh my gosh, look at all these running backs, right? Look at all these running backs that I can get later, and look at the wide receivers by round 4. I'm like, Amari Cooper and Jerry Jeudy are the best wide receivers I can get at the 3-4 turn. Yeah. Like that's not great. So when I started mapping out the 2v2s, you're like Tyreek or Kupp, it wasn't even a CMC thing. Then Kupp gets hurt. We move him down the ranks, and then it was Tyreek or CMC at 3. And I think that process, no matter where it landed you, I think if you kind of went through that kind of whole exercise that you just outlined and identified kind of that top 5, say if you want to include Kelsey, Eckler somewhere close to there, whatever, that's fine. But I think that top 5 really distinguished themselves there at the top, and it will get you to the kind of the right process. I think exactly how your exposures line up. Hey, there's a little variance to that. You have to have a top 5 pick basically to get one of those guys. Kupp ends up falling that we can't necessarily project, whatever. But I think it's a good example of like the whole process over results things. Like I'm not mad at my Jamar Chase teams. I'm not mad at my Cooper Kupp teams, but I am, of course, not happy looking at them down in 12th place, but I am like comfortable when you go back and run through the process that got you there. And I think that's the really, really important part where we get to this part of the season and everybody's just, it's right or wrong. You were right or wrong on every single player as opposed to the whole process to get through it. And that's where I'm starting to feel better. Like my advance rates are basically like stone average, like right at it. Expecting across all the sites. I'm doing pretty well on drafters, but DK and Underdog are totally so because I have a bunch of total duds and then a bunch of big hits, and like that just kind of balances itself out, and you hope to have a good team. But I'm continuing to try to make sure I'm thinking through like that whole process, and I think that top 5 in CMC is a really good one that a lot of people just I think, throw out the window once the season starts.
The other thing that I want to think about going forward, just because we're talking about this top 5 structure stuff, is the other thing that I was doing that I brought up a few times was polling the few guys towards the end of the draft up into that 3, 4, 5 spot. I did it with AJ Brown more than anybody. And I also did it with Amon-Ra a little bit later in the season as well. And obviously CMC scored a ton of points. So yesterday, and this is a 1 week results oriented type argument, if you want to call it that, but I'm kind of trying to look at it from the whole season. And I actually like that I have 20% AJ Brown, but some of it is with him pulled up to the 3rd round. It's actually better with my Amon-Ra shares because I have like 10% Amon-Ra, and I did it more often than taking him where he was going. So I just getting those unique combinations of AJ Brown, of Amon-Ra. I wish I was doing it with Diggs. I was a little uncomfortable with that situation. And I also think that you can only do it with a certain amount of players as well. So identifying who you'd like to do that with, the 1 or 2 players towards the back of the draft, in a spot that you're comfortable. Maybe the 3rd was bad. Maybe it should have been the 4th. Maybe it should have been clearly Jefferson, Chase, CMC. Then you can play with that 4th spot. And like, I like Tyreek. I mean, he's crushing, obviously. But if you felt a little uncomfortable about that and that's your delineation point, maybe that's good. I don't know. So I got to figure that out for next year as well, as we establish another top 3, top 4, top 5 next year. What is that? Who can I bring up? When can I bring them up? How can I get these players unique? But I feel really good. I haven't even looked to see if those particular AJ Brown teams are advancing, but I just know that I did it. And I'm like, at least I know that some of these AJ Brown teams are different than other AJ Brown teams. Some of these Amon-Ra teams are different than other Amon-Ra teams. And if they get through, I like having that edge for the playoff formats. And hell, on drafters, I like it too, because now I'm like, if I'm in the middle of the field and my AJ Brown team,
how are you going to get up there?
Right. Is different than all the other ones. It might even be better on drafters, to be completely honest. That's something else to think about. So this is where my brain goes on Sundays as I'm watching teams and upset about my 2v2 of Kyren Williams and the Ravens D versus, Josh Kelly, the worst running back in the league with the Chargers defense.
Yep, I played Josh Kelly as well. He's dead to me. I was cheerfully, like, I was celebrating. I don't mean celebrating the injury, but I drafted one main event team on FFPC and drafted the quasi zero running back. So not total zero running back, but Brees and Dobbins, Brees in the 4th and Dobbins in the 6th. And clearly that has gone very well. But desperately needed Josh Kelly, needed a running back to be able to slot in to the RB2. And it was like fist pump when, all right, thank God we made one more. We'll figure out RB2 again next week. But it's a total disaster every single week. And I'm like, why? We have Chuba Hubbard. I think he outscored him by like 4 points. I'm like, I could have just fucking played. It's not going to matter, but it's one of those things where Josh Kelly, not going to be results oriented too long. He did have a 1 good game when Eckler was there. Maybe he needs Eckler. Sometimes that happens, right? Yeah. Sometimes you need that other guy to be kind of the lightning to your thunder to open some things up for him. It's clearly not going very, very well. But just to piggyback on your 2 things, not to make the whole conversation about CMC, but I also think it's one of those really interesting, because it's also not just with CMC, but interesting offensive situations where if anybody plays like NBA DFS or whatever, or NBA fantasy, right? You have a situation where when a player is out, right, for rest purposes, or, Kawhi Leonard, the king of sitting out for rest, he sits out. Paul George, right? Terrence Mann, Norman Powell, whatever, that the guys come in and like they're the best plays because, right, now you have a $4,500 backup guard who's starting and going to play 10 more minutes than he normally does, right? It's a projection, a little bit more of a projection, playing time, volume, accumulation sport. Football is event-based, right? It's much more like baseball than people will give it credit for, because we just think, oh, look at this guy projects for this many carries and this many targets or whatever, and match that up right to his price, add in a little touchdown, boost, whatever, and you get reasonably accurate projections. But like, if you don't score a touchdown, none of that shit really matters, other than CMC, who was going to catch passes and get a bunch of yards regardless, but he's not going to score 50 fantasy points without touchdowns, right? Why did he have a big game? Because he scored 4 touchdowns. You have to score the touchdowns. And so you need those events, the touchdowns, to really win you stuff. With the 49ers specifically, they are a little bit like an NBA team on offense, where when they are missing a guy or a guy is banged up or whatever, like I know Ronnie Bell had the 1 touchdown on the showdown slate or whatever that it was, but like Jawan Jennings ain't stepping in for 10 targets, right? And I know he was out this week too, but like Ronnie Bell's not getting 10 targets. Danny Gray, I don't even know if he's on the team anymore. Like these guys are not getting the ball, right? Like Jordan Mason played a couple of snaps because CMC needed a sip of water from carrying the team on his back for so long. Like Debo was played, but clearly not 100%. I don't even know why he was active in this game, to be totally honest with you. Basically not playing, not involved in the offense. So look what happened. Christian McCaffrey, 50 ball. Brandon Ayuk, like 160 yards. The whole offense flowed through them. Now, Kittle got left behind, but some weeks it'll be Kittle, right? Some weeks it's like, okay, maybe they shut down CMC in the run game and Debo's banged up. It's Ayuk and it's Kittle. And there's so many benefits to that. That's why when people do how can you draft all those players on that offense so highly? They can't all possibly get there at that price. It's like, it doesn't work that way. And this week with the 49, we're a month in. Every 49, Kittle didn't have a big game, but he scored 16, which is big for
a tight end.
Big for a tight end. He's had a couple, I think 2 like usable weeks. Ayuk, week 1, absolutely nuts, right? CMC is just steady every week. And then the big one this week. CMC steady, Ayuk, big week 1, big week 4. Obviously missed a game. When he missed, Kittle pops up. Debo has a monster week, right? Yep. It's like there's value in that. Now, you're not drafting all of them on the same team. Sometimes you'll run bad on the gut, right? Debo gets hurt. Shit, that team's done. But if you draft all of the 49ers, you're going to, across your portfolio of 150, hundreds, whatever, however many teams, you're going to get that benefit. And it's like we assume there's not going to be chaos and anarchy all summer because it's hard to imagine it before it happens. And then we're a month in, and I'm not even talking about the Nick Chubbs and the, those kinds of injuries, just the little nuances, right? Mike Williams, the little like, oh, Debo missed a week. Okay, you really want CMC and Ayuk that week. Oh, Ayuk missed. Guess what? Debo, you really want him that week. It's like all that stuff happens throughout the course of the season. You just hope it plays out in your favor. But it's important over the summer when we're like, all the 49ers are going in the top 5 rounds. How could that possibly be? And why doesn't that mean Brock Purdy's undervalued? It's like, not necessarily, right? Like there's nuance to all of that. And so this week, just, it really had me thinking about that with the 49ers, because we're through 4 weeks and it's been the 49ers story ever since week 1. It's just ping ponging amongst all these guys. Oftentimes because someone's not healthy.
So that's something that I was thinking about throughout as well. The other thing I was thinking about with the 49ers is we were catching a lot of shit in the offseason by some people that, well, you don't really want 49ers because they're playing the Washington Commanders in week 17, because everyone was a fucking weather expert in June of what was going to happen.
Well, and everybody knows who the best defenses are, right? We've figured that part out. That's solved. Yeah.
So all that, and the 2
games. I don't know who the best defenses are now. We're a month in, and I can't tell you who the best defenses are. Nobody's good on defense.
No. And the point that I was going to bring up is that game is looking really good for week 17 right now, right? And we're talking about tight ends, we're talking about matchups and stuff like that. You know who's going to win the $3 million, and you're going to shake your head when I say it. The other game everyone was shitting on was Atlanta-Chicago because of weather, because Atlanta's slow pace, because Chicago's slow pace. Chicago, buddy, is offensive dream right now. You just want to be
Field.
Yeah, that's the new Coors Field is Coors Field, and the Chicago Bears is Coors Field, because those Denver Broncos are garbage as well. But that Atlanta game, I know that they try to run slow pace and stuff, but they're going to still throw the ball some. And I won't be shocked if it's Kyle Pitts on the winning, team, because it's the 1 week he actually goes off is week 17. So you drag Kyle Pitts to the finals and he gets 2 touchdowns because it's the freaking Chicago Bears. And you're just got a running back with DJ Moore or something like that, or one of the running backs, because the game's just shooting out. And you're like, okay, the 2 games that we didn't expect to shoot out are the biggest scoring games of this week. I can see that definitely happening. The Commanders offensively look like, in terms of like pushing teams, is going to be great. And the 49ers have not been pushed yet. I know Arizona hung with them yesterday, but they still didn't push the 49ers the way that I want to see the 49ers offense push. So just a lot of things to be thinking about as we get, a quarter of the way through the season yesterday. And those were some of the things that I'm excited about, because I have a lot of Atlanta with Chicago. I have a lot of Commanders with the 49ers. I faded some of the other games that people had taken, and I still kind of feel good about it. Right. I mean, that Colts Raiders game, I'm still fine that I don't have a lot of that. I'm not saying it can't bite me in the ass. Absolutely can. But I'm happy to have these other games with these teams that just can't perform. And there's no fixing Chicago this year. They just can't. They're not going to be able to fix that. There's no fixing Denver, like, defensively enough to and Russ.
They've given up 100 points. They've given up 100 points in the last 2 weeks.
Yeah.
100.
Yeah. I mean, what a crazy game that was yesterday. And to Hacker's point, what the other thing I was thinking about when I was watching the Broncos play, I was like, Chargers are going to win all the money.
Yep.
Like, Chargers are winning all the money this year. That Broncos Chargers week 17 stuff, you get those teams through. It's just going to win all the goddamn money this year.
It is a good kind of segue into some of these other spots, but like how, and I promise, Cobra Kai, I'm going to get to your questions and comments in the chat because it's kind of what I'm going to bring up here, but where we make all these sweeping assumptions. And again, I'm not even trying to say that I'm making a sweeping assumption right now about any of this. The things that we're talking about right now, the things that we talk about every Monday on this show, A, they change week to week. And B, like, if last week, the Commanders, as you mentioned, had their worst offensive game, got absolutely destroyed, 9 sacks, 4 turnovers or 4 or 5 turnovers for Howell. Horrible. They got destroyed by the Bills, right? And it looks like, crap. The offensive line and the way Howell plays and takes a lot of sacks, this is bad. And it's, and they got the Eagles next week, one of the best pass rush in the NFL. And look what happened. They could have won. They nearly did win. Actually, they should have went for 2, by the way, when they scored the touchdown with no time left at the end. On the road in Philly, you're a massive
Riverboat Ron.
Yeah, Riverboat Ron. My
coward
ass.
Ron.
Yeah, we need a new nickname. Total nonsense. Just anyway. But they should have gone for it. But I mean, Howell throws for almost 300 yards. He had a couple awesome runs showing like he's a really good runner. Terry McLaurin is still awesome at football. I know he's kind of dominating things now, and Dotson's kind of a secondary guy. Curtis Samuel getting a lot more work. But point being, all these guys are useful. And that's what we talked about all summer, is like, if Howell can just be competent, or if he's so incompetent that Jacoby Brissett comes in and he can just be competent, they got dudes, man. And I think we might just need to bury Antonio Gibson, but everybody else, B-Rob, all those guys look really appealing. And that was something where, I don't think that the market was really keen on that. And then, as you mentioned, the week 17 things like, the 49ers defense is too good. It's like, the 49ers defense is strong, but you don't score 0 fantasy points against the 49ers defense, right? The Cardinals pushed them, to a certain extent. The Cardinals pushed them. The Rams, these offenses are pushing them that are not amazing. If the 49ers are going to score points, also, by the way, the 49ers corners and secondary is bad. There's a reason why Michael Wilson, who, as Jonathan Coe brings up, how about those Arizona bringbacks to those Eagles decks? You got Michael Wilson. You got, I can't imagine they're still trotting Ertz out there later, but the Rondale had a big game last week. These games that, if you really are trying to predict exactly who can and cannot score because the defense is too good in week 17, we're seeing this already. And so it's another one of those good reminders, like with the top 5 thing in terms of the process stuff. I know we all get enamored with it and get enamored with certain games, right? But doesn't Chiefs Bengals look a lot different now? That everybody, right? That came out and it was like, oh my God, Chiefs Bengals, we got to go all in. The ADPs got moved up. You saw our projected ownership. We did shows over the summer about projected ownership. Every one of the top projected owned player pairings was Chiefs, some form of Chiefs Bengals, because everybody was just enamored with that game from a correlation perspective. the Bengals might be tanking by the end of this year, dude. They're one of the worst teams right now in the NFL. It could go totally south. Plus, the Chiefs' defense, frankly, is better. I know they got cooked up by Zach Wilson last night, but the Chiefs' defense has been better, whereas other defenses have been worse, right? Some offenses are better. Mention, as Cobra Kai has been talking about here, segue into the Texans, one of the biggest surprises of the year. Also, their defense is also a little bit better than we probably thought that they were going to be. But the Texans, right? CJ Stroud is just much better than we thought. Nico can play. Tank Dell can play. Robert Woods is not great, but he's not totally dust. This is with no offensive line. So like all these things that we over the summer that we thought we're going to be wrong about. I'm wrong about most of the shit, but that's the point, is assessing everything and making sure you're like not being overconfident, especially the team level takes. Like, I think you can say confidently, like, which players, within reason are like really good and really bad. There's a lot of middle ground, but like in terms of like defenses and like weather and all that kind of stuff, like, buddy, like I don't think it's worth your time. And I think we're like literally already seeing this. Look at all these teams we thought were going to be horrible and they're not bad. And look at all these teams we thought were going to be good and they're horrible.
And we also need some defense to be played in these week 17 matchups, because high scoring games usually correlate with turnovers and getting short fields and stuff like that. So now you don't want to play like the Ravens or the 85 Bears defense or something like that, but we can name the years that those defenses were around because they were such outliers, Legion of Boom, that type of stuff. Like we just don't often have outlier defenses like that, and especially now. So if you can tell me that a defense is going to be decent enough that they're going to get sacks, they're going to cause short fields and stuff like that, it's like great, because that means that their offense is going to score a bunch of points most likely. I mean, the Dallas one is the outlier this year where the defense is scoring fucking 2 touchdowns a game. I keep swearing a lot this one, but it's just, it's so annoying. But it feels unsustainable at the moment. So that's the one that, like, if I'm worried about anything, it's the Dallas game, week 17, because the offense gets to take off the whole game.
And even with that one, so 3 out of 4 games, the defense has done this. What happened in the other one? What if it's that one?
Yeah.
The Cardinals beat them.
Yeah.
The Cardinals beat them, and they moved the ball every drive. Yeah. I know it's maybe a little fluky, Diggs, but also like the Cowboys did lose Trevon Diggs. So I know that they dominated again this week against the Patriots, but they've played some bad offenses. And yes, they've caught. They're gonna force turnovers. Their pass rush is too good, right? That's just how it goes. But also, sometimes you don't get home, or sometimes the secondary is okay for them. It's not the best part of their defense. Look what happens. The Cardinals ring up a bunch of points on them. Josh Dobbs is running on them and throwing on them, and Rondale's ripping long runs, and like it was just incredible what the Cardinals did to them. So like, there's variance. Even I feel confident that the Cowboys defense is good, and I also would agree with you that if I get to week 17 and I got my main game stack is a Cowboys game stack, I'm not feeling very good about it. But you also never know. Sometimes you get that game where the Cardinals
they're playing Detroit too. So it's like, let's hope they get a turnover or two. Let's just hope they don't house it. And then we're getting short fields and we're getting Detroit launching the ball all over the field the entire game. Feels great, right? Like that's kind of what we want. We just don't want them to house every single one. So I think that is maybe one of the biggest takeaways this year is, as soon as somebody starts bringing up week 17 weather, I'm just going to start rolling my goddamn eyes from now on in June, right? Like, I'm not saying a few days out, but like, if you start telling me you're worried about a weather situation and it's June 7th and I'm only drafting my 43rd Best Ball Mania team, and you're like, I'm just really worried about this Browns Jets game because the weather is historically bad in Cleveland and I think it's going to be a windstorm. It's like, shut up. Just shut up. What are we doing here? Like, yeah, it's a possibility, but so is a clear normal day in in Cleveland or whatever. Yeah, we prefer dome games, but to go away from some of these teams because of it and because of defense, like in an industry where we're looking at analytics, feels like bad analytics, right? Like there's bad chalk. This is probably a bad process is what I would say. And it's probably why we haven't built in a weather model into our spike week rankings. It's like, Terry McLaurin, you should be a 5th rounder, but because he's playing outside week 17, maybe you should make him a 6th rounder. And if we do that, I think it just goes too far on that spot.
Yep, I totally agree. And here's a hypothetical for you, and I guess technically not a hypothetical, but a question piggybacking off of that. So we just have assessed that the Broncos are terrible. Their defense is terrible. It's going to be terrible. And the Chargers are pretty good, give or take. Second half yesterday was putrid from them, by the way. Probably because Herbert broke his finger or something like that. And obviously no Mike Williams, but a little disappointing second half from them. But nonetheless, the game in week 17 is Chargers at the Denver Broncos. And so, if you just use defense from last year, you would say that's not that good of a matchup for the Chargers, right? Because Denver's had a decent defense. It wasn't amazing last year, but they had a decent enough defense for the last few years. And then you compound the fact you're like, Denver on New Year's Eve? No, thank you. I'm going to go to one of the dome games, right? Would you rather have potentially bad weather against one of the worst defenses we've seen in goddamn forever? Would you rather risk that for the best matchup on the board, or go to a dome, that just because you know that the weather's a little better? Like, sign me up for the guys facing the Broncos every week. Like, yeah. The Broncos and the Bears. I understand there's weather risk, but guess what? The defense still sucks in the bad weather. Like, okay, they might not catch an 80-yard bomb, but they're probably still going to score some points. And so,
for a dome game that Aiden O'Connell's starting in, let's just say that he's starting week 17. Right. Like, we saw that game, we saw that situation yesterday, right? Would you and to your point, would you rather have that game where the Colts just kind of run clock as much as they possibly can, go and win 14-17, 20-0, 20-3, 20-10? Or would you rather have the upside of that Chargers offense that actually is going to get some pushback on the other side? Because Russ is, I'm not going to say he's cooking, but he's preparing the meal a little bit. He's doing some meal prep over there. Like, you're getting something out of him at this point in time. So I totally agree. I think it's something that, like, as soon as I hear it next year, I am going to roll my eyes. And if I'm ever on a show with somebody doing it, I'm just going to call them on it. Like, cause how do you not at this point?
I'm going to try to do it right when we'll do a schedule release show, and I'll go through all the bad weather games that we have to fade. Side note on the Bears Broncos game. I mean, I love if you're a sicko like all of us are, and all you watching, you love the bad team shootouts, right? The games that nobody watches on the Sunday ticket, or they don't show up on Red Zone or whatever, because nobody gives a shit about Broncos Bears, the two worst teams in the NFL. Those are the best fantasy games, right? I mean, it's the two worst defenses in the NFL, and just total anarchy and chaos. I mean, it seems like Javonte Williams is okay. That was another injury that I kind of forgot. It also does not seem like Chase Claypool is okay, by the way, not injury related, but being told to stay away from the team now. Clearly there's something going on with that guy, but good for everybody else, I guess. There's more playing time to go around for all the wide receivers. But that game was just total anarchy, almost 500 yards of total offense from the Bears. Another thing that was a big talking point over the course of the whole summer was it was never that the Bears offense was going to be so bad we couldn't draft those guys, right? What was the talking point with Justin Fields and DJ Moore specifically? They run too much. Their pass rate, do you see how much their pass rate has to regress? And I understand the Bears suck, and if you drafted them other than this week, you're probably not that happy with those guys. But again, going back to the process over the results type of stuff that we've mostly been talking about here on this show, was like, that's not like how regression works. That's not how pass rate and stuff works. Like, you don't start with what you did last year. You start with basically a league average baseline and work your way around there. And look, they're so bad. They can't do what they did last year. Like, NFL teams don't operate in that way. Justin Fields threw 35 times yesterday or something for 340 yards and 4 touchdowns. Like, the passing volume, if you faded them for passing volume, I hate to break it to you, but the passing volume is there. They're throwing, they're dropping back to pass. It's just they suck, and they've had a couple bad matchups, but also they're not very good on offense. And so that is like another little bit of a lesson. It's like, we try too hard to be too precise in our projections, as opposed to just being like, Okay, yes. Are the Bears going to be the pass heaviest team in the league? Of course not. But like, let's just create a range, and slot these guys in based on some. But let's not, again, with the weather. Let's not try to be too precise. Where is it going to blizzard in week 17? We don't really have to do that. Like, we can draw better conclusions. We can use better information on all of that. And then the only other thing that just the Broncos are going to be that bad team that you just don't want anybody from. They did score a defensive touchdown yesterday, so it is what it is. But I think Sutton scored again yesterday, but they threw 27 passes, I believe, to 11 different players on the offense. Yeah. Sean Payton, I think we, as an industry, gave Sean Payton a lot of credit. It was all Nathaniel Hackett, right? It was Russ. It was Nathaniel Hackett. Sean Payton is going to come in. It can't get worse. And it technically hasn't gotten worse, like offensive scoring wise, but from a fantasy perspective, this dude doesn't give 8. Like Patrick Mahomes didn't give a shit about your bet on the Chiefs last night. Sean Payton does not give a shit about the fact that you drafted any of his wide receivers, because he's going to play Lil Jordan Humphrey and Adam Troutman and Brandon Johnson and Jaleel McLaughlin. Shout out to the all of our thesis on, well, P. Ryan will be good early in the season before Javonte, gets back up. Just no, he won't, because Jaleel McLaughlin is.
None of them are.
Yeah, they all suck, and Jaleel McLaughlin's getting the work now. So the Broncos are just. It is what it is. They're going to stink, and I think it's going to be Stidham probably later on this year, and not Russ. I imagine they'll try to get out from underneath Russ unless they magically win a couple games.
I just don't know why you would go to like, I understand that if it was like a young quarterback, but Stidham's been in the league for so long that I just think that going away from Russ wouldn't make a ton of sense for them. So I'm like kind of still optimistic that Russ finishes out this season and then they get rid of him. I don't think it'd be so funny if it was the Derek Carr situation and Stidham was the same exact quarterback, but because I just don't think they're going to do it. I think they're just going to run with Russ because they're paying him so much goddamn money, try to get out from him next year. What I'm curious about is not Russ, but do they try to move Judy? Do they try to move Sutton? Like, that feels like the play for them. If I were in the front office, it's like, clearly we need to rework this offense for the future. Getting something in return for one of those two guys might make more sense. And it feels like Sutton would actually probably command a little bit better of a deal for them, because Judy is, I don't know. Judy's chirping on Twitter too, so they might just move him.
Yeah, I don't know. Judy's been just the guy that shows flashes over the course of his early career, and it's never really, like, I think we perceive his talent to be better than his talent is. Like, his name and his draft capital, right? Went to Alabama, was a part of that insane group of wide receivers. And I think he could move on. I'm not writing him off. He could move on to another place and pop up. It could just be a Denver issue for Jerry Jeudy. But like some of the people have said, Russ isn't playing that bad. And I didn't mean it to sound like Russ is playing. I actually don't. I think Russ is playing fine, generally speaking. Yeah. He's not the problem. It's basically everybody else. It's basically everybody else on the whole roster. But Stidham is signed for next year. They gave him a 2-year deal. And it would just be, to me, like, if they win enough games to where, they're certainly probably not going to get Caleb Williams. That's not over, I guess. I don't want to say that, but it seems reasonably tough to get Caleb, because there's some teams that are pretty bad in the NFL. Shout out to the Bears, but they should have lost if they wanted to get in the Caleb Williams. I actually don't know if they have their pick this year, so it might not even matter. If I remember correctly, they might not have their pick. So it would be like do we want him to be the guy next year? Let's see if Stidham is better than Russ, because we know we're going to cut ties with Russ and eat a little bit of dead money type of situation. Like I said, I have no idea how it's going to play out, but these are like the types of things that are going to happen this year. I don't know who it's going to be. Like, people were drafting Kyler Murray. He may not play. Josh Dobbs is playing really well, generally speaking, for Arizona. Other than to see what they have in Kyler, they don't have a lot of real reason to bring Kyler back, right? The Broncos, Sean Payton has no ties to Russ. We talked about that all offseason. They could just see what they got in Stidham, right? The Bears, they don't have a lot of reason to bench Justin Fields either, But, if they're 0 and fucking 12, like anything can happen. Like anything can happen with these really bad teams. And on the flip side, we saw the alternative to that. Anything can happen when the team's undefeated, right? Eagles benched all their guys in the week 17, the biggest game of the year. No one's predicting any of that. I'm not saying it's going to happen. I think the Eagles are going to lose a few games this year. That defense is not very good. But like all this chaos is like the whole thing. It's the whole game, right? You were last year, if you drafted 100% Hurts Eagles stacks and 100% Jags Lawrence stacks, you were so fucking right that it's not even funny. It like you probably advanced like every goddamn team that you drafted. And guess how much money you won in week 17? Not a goddamn cent, because your whole team sat out in week 17. And it's just like all that chaos is important to keep in mind when we're analyzing all this, that it feels like we know everything through 4 weeks, and we certainly have learned a lot, but so much shit's going to change and so much stuff isn't going to change. But by the time the fantasy playoffs get here, it just doesn't work out the same way it has so far this year.
2 things. Let's just hit this last point on the Broncos. The Javonte Williams stuff, I wasn't drafting him. I feel good about that now. And I think I'm going to kind of, until we're proven otherwise, and science is updating every single year and getting these guys back quicker and quicker and better. But if it's as bad as his was, like, because we talked about how his and Breece Hall's were different, I think I'm going to be comfortable just fading guys the next year off the really bad ACL, MCL stuff going forward until we're proven otherwise by more than one case. And Breece Hall still looks good off of his, never good to tear an ACL, but like a better injury than
awesome. He
looks
awesome.
Amazing. And if Zach Wilson can do what he did last night on a somewhat consistent basis, they're going to have to keep giving Breece Hall the ball. That looks like it's going to be a home run going forward. I think.
Let's I want to hit I apologize to the chat. We got a lot of things to talk about on Mondays. I want to hit some of these comments, but then I do want to talk about Jets a little bit, because obviously there's one game and that was a very different outcome than we've seen from Zach Wilson for several years now. But I think it's really interesting to think about moving forward. This is actually like a funny question. Cobra Kai says, Nico Collins or Jamar Chase rest of the season? Give me Nico Collins if I had to guess, because I think Burrow gets shut down within a month. I actually am going to bet the Cardinals this week as well. Home dogs to the Bengals, and Arizona looks pretty punchy to me. So I just can't back the Bengals, but I would still take Jamar Chase over Nico Collins, to your point. But the fact that this is not like totally insane, I think it's Chase pretty clearly, but I understand where you're coming from. Like in a season-long managed league, if I don't know who the Texans play next week, so forgive me, but just like in a net neutral matchup, and I was like, I got to win. I haven't won a game this year, and I had to choose between Nico and Chase, and you said, just give me the comfort level of the guy in the better offense. I would not think you're totally crazy. I think choosing Nico over Chase is forgetting about the fact that sometimes teams struggle in the first month, and Jamar Chase is a top 5 wide receiver in the NFL. And also his floor has still been high, even with the Bengals scoring 3 points a game. Basically, he's still getting there, reasonably speaking, in fantasy, whereas Nico still had some duds, even though he's been awesome. But I think this is like an interesting thought exercise in terms of where do you value Jamar Chase after a really bad month, and it not looking, more importantly, it's not looking great, moving forward. This isn't a Ravens situation where we're like, we're worried just because it doesn't look very good so far, but we'll give them time to get better. This is like a lot of systemic issues from the Bengals and a quarterback that rushed back from a calf strain.
Yeah, but this is also technically has to be a get right week for them. Like they have to get right against Arizona. The NFL needs them to get right against Arizona too. So just be a little careful about betting on the Arizona Cardinals this week.
Well, they opened as 7.5 point home dogs to the Bengals. And I hate to tell you, but the Bengals should not be 7.5 point favorites against fucking anybody, certainly not on the road. But it's bet way down. And that might've been the preseason opening line. But anyway, I think that is totally fair. Another interesting one, Michael Wilson over QJ and Josh Palmer. This isn't exactly what I would use as this example, but it does go to show you that like talent does matter, mainly for Josh Palmer, but also I never thought QJ was any good as a prospect either. So it's a little bit of hindsight bias for me that he hasn't popped yet. Plenty of season. Anything can happen, especially without Mike Williams. And they need somebody, man. They need somebody. But Josh Palmer had 20 yards receiving until the very last play of the game. They actually were up by 7, 3rd and 10 at their own like 15-yard line. They chucked a 50-yard bomb to Josh Palmer. Otherwise, it would have been a really, really bad outcome in the first game in a great matchup without Mike Williams. And he's just not that guy. He's just not. I'm not saying he's not going to have good games, because I don't think Michael Wilson is that guy either. And he just popped off for 80 yards and 2 touchdowns. But like, this stuff matters, right? Like he was like a contingent value bet basically, and he's not good. And like we talked about the Niners contingent value, like Brandon Ayuk stepping into another role has the chance to break fantasy. Josh Palmer stepping into a better role is like, please God, get me a couple 15-point games.
And we saw Johnston's like route participation go up yesterday. Not like his snap count as much, but I forget the exact number, but he ran a bunch of the routes that were dropbacks yesterday. And I think
sucks.
he wasn't great, but I think that you're seeing that they're trying to advance him over Palmer in the long run. And I also think that yesterday's Raiders game, to a point you brought up earlier, was just let's get in here. Let's get the win. We have the bye week. We'll have 2 weeks to reevaluate how we're going to play offensively going forward. And I think that's when you're going to start seeing QJ get more run than he has been getting, would be my guess. Could I be wrong on that? Of course, it's the NFL. We're not the teams don't always do what we want them to do, but I think it's trending the right way for him. Not saying he's going to be a superstar either, but he might be out there running enough wind sprints.
I think he will. I think he will be. And their better days are ahead for both him and Josh Palmer. They're not going to score like no fantasy points most weeks. It's when you play with Justin Herbert and you're out there running routes. Like even Jalen Guyton caught long touchdowns every once in a while, and that dude's the king wind sprinter. Like him and Chris Hogan holding hands running wind sprints every week. This is definitely how I felt as well, having tons, obviously, as everybody knows, I have tons and tons and tons of Sam Howell and tons of Commanders, and the first 2 weeks were fine, and week 3 was absolutely devastating to the old portfolio when your quarterback just literally scores, I think he had 1 or like 0.8 fantasy points. Fun fact, the Superflex tournaments, I think this one might have been big board Superflex, but it was one of the Superflex tournaments on Underdog. I have a team that has 5 quarterbacks. I punted quarterback. Howell and Ritter are my first 2 quarterbacks. And then I had 3 backups. Mike White, Gardner Minshew, and Bailey Zappi, I believe, were my 3 backup quarterbacks on that team. Not this week, but in week 3, 2 of those guys were starters. I used the score of Mike White and Gardner Minshew over Sam Howell and Desmond Ritter last week. So that goes to tell you some of the variation in some of these guys like Sam Howell. But good bounce back for him. Yeah, lots of Bengals comments in the chat. Anything Bengals is looking rough. Yeah. Like you said, this is it, man. This is the week. Some of the matchups have not been awesome. I know the Titans are a pass funnel defense that we love to pick on, but they do have a pretty good pass rush. They have like 4 sacks in every game this year. And with the Bengals offensive line and Burrow not being able to move, that ended up just being too much. So this week, right, we talked about this with A-Chain. This was a little bit of Howell for me this week against the Eagles. Like, dude, if he laid another stinker, Ron, Riverboat Ron, a tugboat Ron was going to be, thinking about Brissett. So to have that game was really important. The Bengals got to do it here because their schedule is brutal. Bills, Dolphins, Ravens, all those guys upcoming on the schedule, and this could get out of hand. Like they could be 1-7. They could be like 1-7.
I'll look it up while you're talking. This is the team that needs the bye week. They're week 7, so I mean they got to get to the bye. So they go week 5 against Arizona, and then their other 2 weeks. Usually you don't like that early bye. They could have used the week 5 or week 6 bye this year for sure. They needed it badly. So
They need
I
it
don't know.
with Burrow. Yep.
I think they're going to be. I think they're gonna. There's gonna be some positive regression for them. Like it almost has to be. Like it's just impossible for them to be this bad. What sucks? Thank God I'm not like a huge Bengals like fan like of the team, because this was supposed to be the year. Like this was
Mhm.
like kind of a make it or break it year, because next year is going to be real tough when they pay Jamar Chase, $80 billion or whatever they're going to have to pay him, and they lose T Higgins and free agency or something like that, because they're not going to trade T. Like they're just
No.
not going to be out of it enough to do that, but they might lose T. It's all signing up to be like an absolute disaster for them.
Yeah, that's making me hungry. KFC.
I know.
That sounds good. Good segue into what we were gonna kind of touch on here as we get closer to the end. Jonathan says the answer to which Chiefs wide receiver, obviously discussing last night's game with the Jets Chiefs. I think it was a really good game to bring up for best ball, because I actually have a slightly different take on this one. And I think I feel reasonably confident the answer to which Chiefs wide receiver was Rashee Rice. I feel like pretty confident in that right about now. And again, 4 games, who knows? His role could not expand. That's just how it goes. But I think if anything, we have mostly learned that Sky Moore is not a difference maker. I'm not saying he won't play. I'm not saying he won't score fantasy points. I just mean like on the NFL football field, at least not yet, he's not a difference maker. And I think Rice, every time he's out there, he's not Jamar Chase or Justin Jefferson, but he looks like a guy who can be a difference maker. He's good with the ball in his hands. He had a bad drop last night, but he's making some plays amongst a group of guys who never make any plays at all. And I know it's fun to dunk on Tony, and week 1 was terrible and he's still not running a ton of routes. But I think the thesis of why you drafted mainly Rice and Tony and Sky somewhat was that you were betting against all these other guys. You were betting on the fact that the talent will win out. The ability to earn targets will win out. And I feel most confident in Rice, but I'm keeping a candle on, keeping a light on for Kadarius Toney over the course of the season to have some good games. I'm not excited about him right now, but I think the guy I am excited about, and I actually wish I had more of, I know you have a ton of, is Rice. I feel pretty good about him.
Yeah, I think the other thing with the Chiefs is they don't need the bye quite the way that the Bengals need the bye, but it's going to be helpful for them. I think they are missing what's his name, the guy that went to Washington quite a bit, the offensive coordinator that moved over to the Commanders. Bieniemy. I think you can see signs of them missing Bieniemy, and I also think you can see signs, throw last week out, of Bieniemy helping that Washington offense quite a bit. So one of the things we were always wondering was, is it all Andy Reid? Is Bieniemy just kind of there? I think Bieniemy did help this offense more than we thought, and I think they need to reevaluate how to go forward in that situation. So the bye week's not going to hurt that team. They don't absolutely need it, but I think you're going to see the Chiefs put it together a little bit more. Obviously, I have to think that because my Chiefs bags are packed and we're ready to go, baby. Something I wanted to ask you about, the other thing I was thinking about, because this is what we do when we're sitting on our couch on Sundays and watching and thinking about best ball, and all these things are going through our head. And the question I always get asked is like, are you upset that you took so much of the elite quarterbacks and stuff? So I started looking at the second round players that went into the third round, and because those were the guys that would have to absolutely be studs this year to be upset about taking those guys. So we're talking about,
mid second to mid third, right?
So we'll say I'll give you the 17th pick. Like this is a rough, but it's like Devontae Adams, Saquon Barkley, and these are guys that were going before the quarterbacks too. But Devonta Smith, Chris Olave, Mark Andrews, T. Higgins. Then it's Mahomes, Hurts, Allen, DK Metcalf, Calvin Ridley, Lamar, Ramondre, Debo. Are you upset if you took these quarterbacks over almost any of those guys that I mentioned for the most part? Like, they're all kind of mid, but at least like Josh Allen is giving you some spike weeks. Hurts is giving you some spike weeks. Mahomes, for the most part, is giving you a floor at the quarterback position. And if he had gotten that touchdown last night that he needed, would have been very big for yesterday, because a lot of quarterbacks did not get there yesterday,
Yep.
other than like Hurts and Josh Allen and a couple others. So I'm still not like totally out, and this can change, right? Some of these guys, Waddle can just start popping off. Olave, God, I guess bring Jameis in or do something. I don't know, but
that was fucking painful. We'll touch on that quickly too.
yeah,
But just sorry to answer that. What I was just gonna say is, I don't think I would draw any conclusions one way or the other. I think if you went ham on those quarterbacks, I think you feel fine. If you full faded them so far, I think you feel fine. Of course, your teams, with some of those guys feel better than others, but I think it's one of those so far. I don't think there was a right or wrong answer to begin with. It was, we talk about that all the time, personal preference. Both you and I saw the thing and did opposite on this specific subject. But I'm fine with my DK Metcalf teams. Do I think he's a slam dunk over whatever Mahomes? No, I don't. I would be right. Yeah. I have good teams that have Geno as QB1. I have good teams that have Mahomes as QB1. I think you can win. So that's not the breaking point of your teams right now, basically, is what I'm saying. That whole range is not the issue for if your teams are bad. It's also not the reason you're winning if your teams are good so far. So we'll definitely be assessing that because it was such a big thing over the course of the summer, but I wouldn't draw anything just yet.
Probably too early.
Yeah. Jets, though, I know we just briefly touched on it. It's one of those where it's the thing that's the most fresh in your mind because we watched it last night and because it was so out of left field. Zach Wilson against the Chiefs defense that frankly has been really good so far this year. And he was awesome. He nearly outdueled Patrick Mahomes. I thought he looked great. I thought, not every throw was perfect, and he was a little bit more typical Zach Wilson at the very start of the game. But man, I don't know what happened, kind of mid-second quarter, early second quarter. The play calling was good. He got locked in. He was accurate as all hell on some tough throws, making good decisions. He was getting the ball out really quick. Collinsworth is kind of obnoxious, but he brought that up, and it was really, really true that Spagnuolo was like a blitz-heavy pressure kind of guy, and he was coming after Wilson a lot early, and then the Jets pivoted, and he was just picking him apart, getting the ball out really quick, and he stopped blitzing him. And it's that's really surprising because Spagnuolo didn't stop blitzing Burrow when Chase 2 years ago, Chase had, 1 billion yards and 4 touchdowns on him, and he wouldn't stop blitzing Burrow, and he stopped blitzing Zach Wilson. And so probably a blip. It's hard for me to imagine the light flipped on all of a sudden in the middle of the game last night for Zach Wilson. But knowing that that's in there somewhere is really positive, I think, for if you have Brees or Garrett Wilson, or if you're a freaking Lazard slappy or, something like that. I feel good about my Brees and Garrett Wilson teams. Good is a relative term compared to it felt like a coffin, because you drafted those guys for Aaron Rodgers. Last night, at least, gave you a little bit of hope, and I think it's reasonable to have a little bit of hope, even though we know Zach Wilson probably turns back into a pumpkin, but I think it's okay to have some hope.
But I think it also, to some of the point you made, is play calling. It felt like he was immensely handcuffed the second and third game. There were certain spots where they were running plays, and it's kind of been a problem across the entire NFL where they're just running plays that don't make any sense. But the Jets especially weren't allowing him to even run plays to push the ball downfield. And when he had to, it felt like it was in his head. It almost felt like someone told him never throw the ball past 5 yards or never throw the ball downfield unless we 100% tell you to do it. And those restraints were kind of opened. Not that they're giving him command of the offense like Aaron Rodgers would, right? Aaron Rodgers walks on the field. He has, he's
the OC.
Yeah. He's the OC, right? That's not what they're going to do for Zach Wilson, but allowing him to be a quarterback, he'll have failures because he's Zach Wilson, but at least giving him the opportunity to fail at a higher level, in terms of, making plays, feels like it's going to be the difference for them and allow you to actually have some faith in Garrett Wilson hell, what do you have? 13, 14 targets last night, something like that. I mean, I think that's what the hope that we need to see is that the playbook's kind of open now, and they're in panic mode in terms of their record. So the playbook has to be open. You can't rely on winning every game in the NFL 10-3. It's not 1975. So they need the quarterback to actually make some plays. So I think that they're going to allow him the chance to. I'm not saying he's going to do it every week, but I think he's going to have the chance to do it every week now.
And I think the big thing, as you mentioned with the play calling, was not just that they were, letting him let it rip a little bit more, which, also is important for his play style. Aaron Rodgers is very much actually, I know he takes shots. He's one of the best quarterbacks of all time. He's actually very much like a dink and dunk guy. And Tom Brady was as well. People forget that they hit some big plays. Of course, they're amazing, but a lot of their game was getting the ball out quick. Oh, first, second read's not there. Check it down, right? Check it down. Keep moving the chains. Get 3-4 yards. Zach Wilson is a lot more of a gunslinger. Now, he played much better and in control last night, but like that was his thing at BYU, right? He freaking runs around. They called him Mormon Mahomes. Like that was his nickname in college because he runs around like a madman, got a big arm, whatever. So you can't expect that guy. It's actually how I feel about like Sam Howell too. He's a little bit more of a gunslinger. You can't expect these guys, especially young players, to have to convert a bunch of 3rd and 7s constantly, right? Against the blitz, against pressure. The other team knows you're throwing. All those kinds of things. You need to be creative in how you call plays. And the segue why I'm thinking about this is definitely Dennis is asking about Pickett. This is the Steelers' problem. It's not their only problem. They got a lot of problems. But this, when you watch them, we talked about this last week because you get Steelers versus Raiders, and it was Tweedledee and Tweedledum coaching on both sides there. And it's watch the Steelers. Run, pass, right? Najee 2-yard run, Najee 3-yard run, 3rd and 5. Oh, incomplete, go punt. Right. Oh, and then you might get a first down pass from the Steelers. Right. Oh, incomplete. Guess what's happening on 2nd down? Najee run. And it's like you are handcuffing your quarterback who's not that great to begin with. Right. This isn't Rodgers or Brady or Mahomes where you don't give a shit. Like the Chiefs don't give a fuck what down and distance it is for Patrick Mahomes. The guys, how many did he convert last night? A bunch of 3rd and 20s or whatever. These kids are not that. So you can't do that. You can't put them behind the sticks and you think you're helping them, right? It's these boomer OCs. There's the old like establish the run that sets up the pass for this quarterback. Like it goes the opposite. You need to use the pass to keep the defense off balance. They never know if you're throwing or running, right? All that kind of stuff is so important for these young quarterbacks. And I think we saw that with Zach Wilson last night a lot. The first few weeks, like you mentioned, is like Brees run. Okay, if Brees didn't get a long one, all right, bring Dalvin in. Dalvin run. Oh shit, 3rd and 7. Like Zach Wilson against the Cowboys, 3rd and 7. That's not going to be a good down for you, And so it made me think of Pickett in this question.
Atlanta feels that way too.
Atlanta is absolutely that way. And Ritter stinks. Look, Ritter is fucking horrible. You're not going to hear me say anything positive for him. But Arthur Smith is the king of. He might call a first down pass, but then when Ritter makes a mistake, guess what 2nd down is? Run. And I'm not saying, Bijan's awesome and Algier is a good player, but like he just puts Ritter in a lot of bad situations too. Now, Arthur Smith, is much better at this than I am, and Ritter is a problem. But like people are calling for Heineke, and like it's such a funny thing that like the backup is always everybody's favorite player, right? The Bailey Zappi again is everybody's favorite player in New England. We saw that song and dance. We have seen this song and dance with Taylor Heineke. Like I know Ritter sucks, but we also know that Heineke sucks. If he was any good, other teams would have wanted him. Or he would have succeeded before in Washington. He had a couple of decent games. Guess what? Every quarterback has a couple of decent games. We just talked about Zach Wilson having a really good game last night. Taylor Heineke is not the answer. He is a potential stopgap down the road. They have to see what they have in Ritter. My guess is he sucks, and we might see Heineke later in this year, but like you can't call for the backup who is not good either. Like immediately, like Heineke is not unlocking Pitts and all these guys. Like that's an offensive systemic issue. Maybe it would help, but like it's not turning Kyle Pitts into the superstar we hope that it is. It's a future quarterback that would be that kind of a thing. But yeah, Pickett to the Pickett point Rob mentioned earlier that He's, I guess, going to try to push to play. He did not blow out his knee, which is good. I believe that was the report, but we'll see. I would not expect him to play, but it doesn't seem to be a long-term issue, although I'm not sure how much Kenny Pickett's going to help you. The Steelers offense doesn't look too good. Not a ton to take away from that one. I don't think a really putrid performance against the Texans. They're scoring 6 points. I know no Deontay, and I know Pickett ended up getting hurt, but you got to score more than 6 points on the Texans. The other total just disappointment for me, outside of Bengals, outside of Steelers, and a couple of these other spots, was the Saints. I know Derek Carr kind of rushed back with an injury himself, but if he's so hurt that they had to play this little league gimmick check down shit, he should have not played. That was an embarrassment to football. 14 targets for Alvin Kamara, 13 catches for 33 yards. I've never seen that before. I've never seen that at any level of football ever. Certainly not in an NFL football game with a talented player like Alvin Kamara. I know, like, it's probably good that you're feeling good because he got a bunch of work, but the offense has got to get better because he's not going to get 14 targets every week, right? Like, that's not going to happen. You don't want that bad. You don't want him getting 14 checkdowns because that means the offense just sucks. I know it feels good because he scored 20 DK points, but like, you need them moving the ball and scoring points. And I thought the Saints were going to have a not like an awesome offensive season, but like they had a great schedule. Obviously, they are in a dome. I think their defense is okay, and I thought Carr would help facilitate a little bit, but they are a stone cold disaster. I don't have a lot of hope for them either.
They had to play Jameis yesterday, and like when I was drafting that team that came in third, I took Olave because I'm like, I know Jameis doesn't play the way he used to under Dennis Allen and the Saints and stuff. He's not the guy that you're stacking the defense against and him, and he's going to go out there and throw 6 touchdowns, 4 to his offense, 2 to the defense type of deal. But he still would have been better than whatever the hell happened yesterday. Yesterday, to your point, absolute embarrassment. I know Derek Carr wants to play and you want to see your quarterback grit through it, but not at the detriment of the team to that effect. Like, if you're thinking 90% Derek Carr is as good as 100% Winston, whatever, but that was like 50% Derek Carr or whatever it was, which Winston would have definitely been the better option there. Hell, play Taysom Hill at quarterback over whatever you did yesterday.
Right.
Like, it was garbage. It does not leave me loving the Saints for the future. Hopefully Carr's better, but come on, bro. Like, if you're that bad, do what's better for the team, not what's better for, the ego of, I'm not saying Derek Carr's an egomaniac, but it feels very ego driven for him to be on the field between him and his head coach.
Yeah. It just really didn't make a lot of sense to me. This is a totally reasonable point. Falcons should take the losses with Ritter. If Ritter's garbage, why win games? Then you have to trade draft capital to get up and get a better pick. The problem is, as bad as Ritter is, they're gonna win games. They're 2-2. Mm-hmm. They're like every I believe is it them or it's the AFC South. Everybody's 2-2, but I mean, the Falcons in their division, everybody is like all bundled up.
Garbage.
Right?
They're all garbage.
The Bucks are 3-1. The Bucks are 3-1, but 3-1 Bucks, 2-2 Saints, 2-2 Falcons. Like, they're right there. They're going to be in this division race, no matter how much we hate them for fantasy. They're going to win some games. That's just what Arthur Smith does, and this is actually a talented roster. I'm not trying to wish away this season. Hopefully we'll bring in a bunch of money in a few months, but I'm very much looking forward to, also not looking forward to the discourse around it, but I am looking forward to next year when they bring in a new quarterback and see if we can actually get somebody that can complete a pass to all these amazing weapons, because my goodness, Bijan, London, Pitts is fun to watch them run routes and not catch passes and fun to watch Bijan run. But if we can ever get a quarterback, they are going to be very fun. Yeah, this is shout out to the Broncos. What a total train wreck. We covered just about anything. Was there any other like kind of big takeaways that caught your eye from week 4 in particular? But yeah, Bills, Dolphins, we didn't talk too much about. Bills just laid the smack down. A little smidge, not worried for the Dolphins, but Teron Armstead went down again. Their best offensive lineman, their left tackle, got hurt again. It hadn't mattered too much against bad defenses when he's been out, but when the Bills have a very good defense. We saw that against Washington. We saw that here against Miami. So I think the Armstead thing matters against some of the really good defenses, but they're going to score points regardless, and their defense stinks. So that's good for them in terms of shootouts. Like, please, sweet Lord baby Jesus, let me get a Dolphins Ravens stack to the Week 17 finals, because that'll be a lot of fun no matter how it shakes out.
And Achane looks like he has, I'm not saying he's going to get 30 to 50 points every single week, but he has carved out a role in this offense that they cannot deny putting him on the field right now.
Correct.
Right? Like, it's just the backlash you would get from the fan base in general would be awful. I'm not saying he's going to go in there and take over everything, but you're going to see Achane on the field going forward. And that feels very, very good for probably a lot of us, because I know I have some big Achane bags going on.
Yeah, definitely good. I think he's never going to be like a workhorse, but you don't need him to be. Mostert's still going to get to play. If something happens to Mostert, Jeff Wilson will fill in for that other role, but he's going to have a very strong role. And my God, you couldn't hardly dream up a better fit. I mean, Tyreek is the best fit for the Mike McDaniel offense, but as a running back, I'm not sure you could, McCaffrey, but he's a fit for everything. This kid, the way they, create explosive runs and explosive plays with their running backs, my God, he is something fun to watch. Only other thing, another big game from Puka, another big game from the Rams offense. And there were some comments in the chat about like being worried about Kyren. Let me just say that of all the people you've drafted in best ball, right? You drafted hundreds of players. The last player I would be worried about is 20th round Kyren Williams. Don't worry. Yes, he's getting a lot of work. Running backs get hurt. That could happen. Of course. Are you worried about every player on your team? I mean, maybe you are, but are you worried about every player on your team that's playing snaps in an NFL game getting hurt? Like, it's possible. Don't let that seep into your brain. You're going to have guys get hurt. Don't stress yourself out ahead of time. Like, it's going to be bad enough, right? If you had Chubb or Mike Williams or whatever, it's going to be bad enough. Don't stress yourself out before it happens. He's at no more risk than anybody else is to getting hurt, even though it feels like, he's getting, he's playing a lot of snaps.
Yeah. I mean, I think the interesting thing for the Rams is, what do they look like offensively with Cooper Kupp back? I don't know how much of a backseat you can get Puka. Does that mean Tutu gets lost in this? Puka definitely has to regress a little bit with Cooper Kupp out there. I don't know how much, though. I'm looking forward to seeing what it actually looks like. I don't know how to gauge it. But if you gauge it right for DFS the first week, you could probably make a lot of money, is what I would say.
I'm just excited to see him, since they've been so good with a skeleton crew out there. You had one of the best wide receivers in the NFL, and you probably remove some Van Jefferson from the offense, and you get a big time field stretcher in Tutu, and Puka's clearly good. And Puka is clearly awesome, but he's not, he's a rookie. He's a late round rookie. We saw 2 weeks ago, you can stymie him at times with certain defenses. He's not a totally perfect player, right? He's not Jamar Chase, Justin Jefferson, Cooper Kupp. He's very, very good, but bringing in Cooper Kupp, is going to probably take away some of the 30-point games from Puka Nacua. But in terms of like making the offense better, making things easier on him, rather than him and Kyren Williams have to carry the whole goddamn offense, and they're not that good. Like, they're good NFL players. They're not that good. You put Cooper Kupp in there. I'm just excited to see what the offense looks like. Hopefully Stafford can stay healthy. But I'm really
Hopefully Kupp
excited.
Can stay healthy too. Like, that's the other thing.
Good point.
Right now, we need him to stay healthy as well. Yeah, interesting to see how they look. I don't know. I think Puka, there's going to be some Puka regression. And then to your point, he's just going to have some explosion weeks. And I wish we had known in the offseason that he was part of the Breakfast Club.
I know, it's bullshit.
We found out afterwards that he asked to go to the breakfast thing and all this other stuff. Like, if I had known, my Puka exposure, which is already kind of decent, would have been through the roof. I would have had so much Puka if I knew that he was eating breakfast with Matthew Stafford.
In hindsight, we should have figured this out, though. He's from BYU. Clearly, we can connect the dots with his school history. Like, shout out Tutu. I don't think a kid named Chatarius is his real first name. Chatarius Atwell, aka nickname Tutu, is probably not the first guy to walk up to ask to get in the Breakfast Club, whereas the kid from BYU probably is a better bet. So just something to build into our Sims for next year. Everybody's touting all their Sims, which is a goddamn hilarious thing that we'll get to in the off season, I'm sure. But something to keep in mind is our Breakfast Club analysis has got to get a little better.
Yeah, we got to get better on that. Make sure we're looking for those reports from the beat writers.
Definitely. All right, we're gonna get out of here. We got a half hour or so before Monday Night Football. Please give us a good game in Seattle. Give us some points. You asked about the elite quarterback type stuff, and I got a fine game from Howell. Tua was a pretty big disappointment. Most of the cheap quarterbacks were a disappointment. So Geno is my last hope this week for basically all of my, and Daniel Jones for my cheap quarterback. So we need good quarterback play tonight. And for the love of God, throw the ball to JSN just once, just to see how it feels. Just once, just to try it out. We will be back tomorrow night, Spike Week Sickos Tuesday show, breaking down everything that has happened that we haven't touched on, particularly from tonight, Monday Night Football, any new news, injury news. We're going to look ahead to the upcoming week. And we got Best Ball Resurrection. We got DraftKings drafts. We got all sorts of stuff that we can start to break down, maybe even hop into a draft tomorrow night. So we'll see you guys tomorrow. Enjoy Monday Night Football. Peace.
Woo! Those were some spicy takes. Want to stay up to date with all of the other spicy takes we're going to have over here at Spike Week? Why don't you press that subscribe button below? You turn notifications on, we draft a team, boom, you know about it. We have another spicy take, boom, you know about it. You can be there. You can draft with us. You want to stay up to date? That's how you do it. All right, we'll catch you later next time here at Spike Week.